What's going on, my beautiful people? Coach Will here. I hope all is well, and in this video we're gonna go in depth on how you can finally get your first pull-up. So with that being said, be sure you leave a like down below, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and do the whole thing. And even if you aren't new, be sure to show some love down below. It really helps the channel grow so I can continue making content like this each and every single day. With that out of the way, let's get straight into it. So when we're looking at the pull-up itself, we have to understand first what goes into actually performing the pull-up. This being, what muscle groups do we have to focus on in order to develop the actual strength to perform the pull-up. Secondly, we have to look at what specific exercise variations we need to do in order to have the specific carryover to actually be able to do a pull-up. And along with that, we will also be going into some breakdown as far as the science goes. How do we break down the sets, the reps, the rest time? What should the frequency look like in terms of how often you should exercise, and so on and so forth. Because the thing is, when we're looking to finally get our first pull-up, we can't just mindlessly go in there and just try to jump on the pull-up bar and pull and then get nowhere anytime soon. We have to be very systematic with our approach. So this is what I'm gonna help you guys do today in this video. Now, you may be watching this video at the moment and wondering to yourself, who the heck is this guy to tell me how to get my first pull-up? Well, a little background on myself. The pull-up is by far my favorite exercise out of any exercise. It is something I spend countless years trying to master and perfect and get stupid strong at. I'm at a point where I'm able to do pull-ups with in the mid 100-pound range. I've done most 150 pounds. I'm able to do 90 pounds for multiple reps and sets, and I've even done 45-pound pull-ups in 1 minute for 22 clean repetitions. So I think I know a thing or two about getting your first pull-up. So that being said, we're gonna get right into the nitty-gritty when it comes to finally getting your first pull-up. So understand that when we're talking about the pull-up, right, we need to break it down accordingly with the proper exercise selection, as well as the reps, sets, and frequency being how often we should be working towards this specific exercise. Now, when we're analyzing the specific exercise selection that we need when it comes to doing our first pull-up, we need to understand that specificity is king when it comes to getting your first pull-up. That being, we want to use exercises that help us emulate the pull-up itself, as well as exercises that help supplement the pull-up motion. So the two exercises that I will always have people start off with is some form of modified Australian pull-up, as well as our traditional Australian row. The reason why I picked these two exercises is these two exercises are often very accessible for individuals to do. You don't have to really fiddle around too much with any machinery. You don't have to find the right load if you're somebody who likes to do assisted pull-ups on the machine. And it's specific enough to where you won't even have to do lat pull downs, because the problem with lat pull downs, in my humble opinion, is that the lat pull downs, you'll get to a certain point where you can't necessarily progress to a level in which you can actually maneuver your own body weight, especially if you're a much more heavier set individual. So with that being said, as far as the reps and sets go for these two exercises, I would always suggest starting off with our Australian pull-up. With the Australian pull-up, we're looking to do anywhere between 3 to 5 sets of anywhere around 5 to at most 15 reps. You may be wondering to yourself, why is the rep range so high? Well, we want to keep into account absolute beginners that are completely new to the exercise. See, when you're learning a motion for the very first time, it oftentimes than not, it's more of a matter of developing the neurological adaptation. In English, essentially developing the skill of the motion versus necessarily the actual muscle and all that stuff that goes into performing the exercise. So we first want to develop proper form and proper technique at a lower rep range to ensure the quality of the repetitions are always maximized. Over time, we can then start to add reps to each set, thus over time getting that progressive overload that we need to ultimately give us that strength carryover to finally being able to perform our pull-up. Now also, I went in depth, I did an in-depth video on the Australian pull-up, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But essentially with the Australian pull-up, this motion allows us to get a little bit of extra support from our lower half in order to lift us up when we get to those points where we're hitting that muscular fatigue. The reason why this is so important is because it allows us to continue to progressively overload and continue to push in a safe and effective manner. This way we're not limited just by our upper body strength alone. This is especially crucial for individuals who simply lack upper body strength. They need that extra kick to help them lift themselves up. So this is why, in my opinion, this is the staple exercise that you should be doing if you really want to progress and get to that next level when it comes to finally getting your first pull-up. Now, the reason why we also supplement this with our traditional Australian row is because we want to make sure we avoid any muscular imbalances. Now, understand that the Australian pull-up itself is a vertical oriented motion, meaning we're pulling in this manner, right? Up and down this way. However, we must ensure that we counteract this with some form of horizontal pulling as well. The reason why is if we do all type of pulling in the vertical motion and no horizontal pulling, this over time can develop overuse and overdevelopment of certain muscle groups and underdevelopment of other muscle groups. Even though you would be thinking to yourself, well, don't they work the same exact muscle group? Yes, however, there are certain smaller muscle groups and stabilizers that are involved in one motion versus the other motion. See, when we look at the human body was designed to move in multiple planes of motion. The human body isn't like a robot. It's not meant to just be straight up and down and left and right. You want to make sure you have variety in the motions that you perform. This way you avoid injury and you maximize results long term. Another benefit to also performing Australian rows is it helps us develop more of the back thickness. See, if you're somebody who performs strictly vertical pulling, you will be missing out on a ton of back development that you get from doing horizontal pulling. The horizontal pulling is really what will help you build that thick, dense muscle in your back, whereas the vertical pulling will really help you build that width. So having one over the other isn't necessarily always the answer. I would always suggest having a combination of the two together. And to top that off, the Australian row also allows us to accumulate more volume when it comes to performing our pulling exercises. And ultimately, if you're able to accumulate more volume with a specific exercise in a specific plane of motion for the specific muscle groups that you're trying to build, you're gonna get more results in the long term. So why not do both of them and have your workout structured accordingly? This way you can maximize results and not waste your time. Lastly, as far as the sets and reps go for the Australian rows, I would suggest about the same parameters for your Australian pull-ups. Anywhere between 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 15 reps is usually a good place to be. Now understand that since you will be performing your Australian rows after your Australian pull-ups, you may hit a little bit of a wall as far as fatigue goes. This is another reason why we have that nice flexibility with our rep range. This way, no matter where you fall along the spectrum, you can always pick and choose how you put together the sets and the reps to fit your strength level and your current needs. And just a little bonus tip when it comes to developing your pull-up, I would also suggest tossing in some negatives once you finally get comfortable with doing your Australian pull-ups and your Australian rows. Essentially what these jumping negatives allow you to do is it allows you to finally get used to what it's gonna feel like to actually do a pull-up. See, oftentimes we're not strong in the concentric motion of a movement, meaning us lifting our body weight against gravity, or if you're doing any form of weightlifting or even something like a push-up, us pushing our body weight against gravity. Anything where we're forcing ourselves against gravity, we're not as strong as, say, going with gravity, meaning we're essentially lowering ourselves in the pull-up or lowering ourselves in a push-up or even lowering ourselves in a squat and so have you. The jumping negatives will also allow you to develop more of a neurological adaptation with the motion, so this way you become more familiar. Once again, it goes back to what I was preaching earlier, where sometimes when it comes to performing a specific movement, it first starts off becoming a skill before it actually becomes a strength and muscle builder. So this will allow you to build the specific skill of the pull-up motion over time, and then once that specific skill has been developed and adapted to your body, over time you can then increase the reps and the sets as you go along. Now the beautiful thing about the jumping negatives to understand is with the jumping negatives we have one more variable that we could play with aside from sets and reps, and that is the time under tension. See, the time of the tension when it comes to our jumping negatives is ultimately the key marker that allows us to really progressively overload and really get the most development out of this specific exercise. When we're doing jumping negatives, the more time under tension we're able to implement, it's a key indicator that we're developing even more strength with the specific movement. Thus, eventually, that time of attention with the negative will over time lead to even more power that you'll have potentially in the positive. So what I would recommend for you to do as far as these jumping negatives go, I would also recommend 3 to 5 sets. That's usually a good ballpark range to be within. And as far as the reps go, being that these reps involve more time with attention, anywhere between 1 upwards to about 5 to 6 reps is usually a good place to be. And as far as how slow the negatives are, I would recommend anywhere between 3 upwards to 10 seconds when it comes to your negatives. If you could do 5 by 5 reps with a 10-second negative on pull-ups, at that point you pretty much should have your first pull-up, essentially. Now, where should you place jumping negatives within the specific regimen? Well, I would recommend you, once you build a base foundation with your Australian pull-ups and your Australian rows, to place at the beginning of your workout, right? So the workout would look a little something like this. You would first start off with your jumping negatives. You would do 3 to 5 sets of 1 to 5 reps with anywhere between 3 to 10-second negatives. You'll then follow that up by doing your Australian pull-ups, 3 to 5 sets of anywhere between 5 to 15 reps, and then you'll finish off with Australian rows with 3 to 5 sets of anywhere between 5 to 15 reps. This way, you're ensuring that you cover yourself on every single basis and you're able to maximize the time spent developing the pull-up exercise, and you're also ensuring that you're getting the muscular development that you need in order to, over time, recover post-workout and then come into the next workout with even more strength, more power, and more drive to get that first pull-up. Now, a couple of other details that we have to be in mind when it comes to our pull-ups and the exercise selection that we have is the rest time between sets, as well as the frequency, that being how often do we actually do these exercises. So as far as rest time, I would recommend anywhere from as low as 2 minutes of rest upwards to 5 minutes. And you may be wondering to yourself, why is the gap so high? Well, typically speaking, when we're looking at rest time intervals, 2 minutes, especially if you're working within more of a hypertrophy rep range, that being, a muscle building rep range, this is a good enough amount of time to allow your body to recover. So this way you could attack the next set with clean and proper technique of the movement that you're trying to do. Vice versa, let's say you're very unfamiliar with how to do the exercise and you're still trying to develop that neurological adaptation, that being the skill to perform the movement, you may need a little bit more rest time between sets to ensure the quality of each set over the quantity. And as far as your frequency goes, anywhere between 2 to 3 times a week is definitely optimal when it comes to finally getting that first pull-up. The reason why the frequency is 2 to 3 times a week versus just doing it once a week is because when we look at how our body builds muscle, the more frequency we're able to implement, that being if we're able to exercise a specific muscle groups, or specific muscle groups in this case, since the pull-up is a compound movement, 2 to upwards 4 to 5 times a week, the more development that we'll have when it comes to elevating our muscle protein synthesis, thus over time being able to build more muscle, thus leading us to progress even faster. On top of that, we got to look at it from the neurological adaptation, that being the skill or developing the skill of the movement. The more we're able to practice a certain thing, the better we'll get at it. So that 2 to 3 times a week frequency is definitely optimal for beginners. I would stray away from doing 4 to 5 times a week, mainly because if you're brand new to the movement, your body may be a little shot at first from trying to get used to all of these new movements. You'll probably be super sore after just the first workout, right? And you may need some time, probably 3 to 4 days, to fully recover or feel like you're recovered enough to then hit it again. So 2 to 3 times a week frequency is definitely a good place to be when it comes to finally getting that first pull-up. And with that out of the way, my beautiful people, that is the video. This is the whole thing when it comes to finally getting your first pull-up. I definitely hope you took something away from this, and I definitely hope that you apply it to your own training. Definitely let me know if this helps you out moving forward, and definitely let me know if you're able to actually get your first pull-up through these tips and tricks that I've given you in this video. And with all that out of the way, if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe, turn on post notifications, do the whole thing, like, comment, and even if you aren't new, man, show some love. It helps the channel grow so that I could continue making content like this each and every single day. But with that being said, my beautiful people, in will we trust? Boom. Until next time.